Hello and welcome to the Too Much Apparently podcast. If you're new here, this is a podcast for the deeply feeling, overthinking, emotionally overloaded humans who've been told they're too much apparently. And if you're back, thanks for choosing to sit with us again.
We're Alice and Carly, two therapists who are also just sensitive weirdos trying to make sense of life, healing, and our own brains. This isn't a professional advice podcast. It's more like the messy, honest conversations that happen when you finally feel safe enough to say what you're really thinking.
This space is for people like us, the ones who've been called too sensitive, too serious, too emotional, too intense, and have spent way too long believing that it's true.
Okay, on with the episode.
Today we're talking about chronic invalidation.
This one is for anyone who's ever been told, directly or indirectly, that their feelings were too big, wrong, made up, or just inconvenient.
And who then spent years or decades wondering if maybe they were right.
We're talking about what happens when this has been your story for so long that you are now plagued with self-doubt, over-analysing everything, and can no longer trust your gut.
Let's get into it.
Oh, this is the episode for me.
Is it? Yeah, I feel like for me as well. Actually, well, I feel like less so, actually, as you're reading through that, which feels nice.
Yeah, I would say there's certainly a difference between now versus how things have been. And yet some of those things definitely still show up for me.
Yeah. And they are there still for me as well. I was at a conference at the weekend and I'm just thinking about the different ways that self-doubt showed up. But there's been a steadying again recently, like another layer of steadying, which feels good. As we were reading through the intro, the word gaslighting popped into my head. And I feel like that's so common. And I kind of feel like this is the flip side of that.
What do you mean when you say flip side?
Is like the result of that.
Oh, okay.
It's like what happens when you've been told over and over again in different ways that how you feel isn't right, that you can't trust yourself, that you can't trust your perception of things.
Well, it's only in recent years, maybe only in the past few years actually, that I've even become aware of chronic invalidation as a thing. It's not a name, a title that I have heard at any other point of my training or roles that I've been in, that, people would talk about invalidation in terms of single moments in time, what it feels like to be invalidated in that moment. But only recently have people begun to speak about the impact of repeatedly experiencing being invalidated over a long period of time, and how chronic invalidation leads to trauma.
Yeah, I feel like it's been a significant part of my personal therapy for a long time, actually. And also, I think there's another layer to it on realizing that I'm neurodivergent.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like there's so much invalidation that comes with being undiagnosed neurodivergent. Well, diagnosed as well, but undiagnosed neurodivergent. Yeah, but the term chronic invalidation, I definitely see it around more now. I was just, as you were talking, I was trying to think, how did I refer to it before? Like, was there some other way? Is there some piece of theory that we would think about it as? But I can't quite put my finger on it.
No, I don't think there was. And it's something I've worked on a lot in therapy as well, but never with a name. Never knowing that actually that's what it is that was being spoken about. And even though I'm hearing more about it now, it's still quite new. It's still not something that I'm seeing being spoken about in many spaces. Because there is now a greater awareness, I mean, there's still a ways to go, but a greater awareness about what it means to live in the world with a sensitive body, particularly with the neurodivergent movement, which has really exploded in the past few years. As more attention is now being drawn to these areas, it's paving the way for more realizations about people's lived experience, about what it is that people have had to put up with, but not that it's something you have to put up with, but that seems to be quite a common experience, where I almost want to say universal experience, to just repeatedly feel like your experiences are invalid.
Yeah. So one thing I was thinking about while you were talking there is about the shift from, because I think part of the way that therapy as a whole has maybe handled the result of chronic invalidation is to look at the problem as being in the person who has been chronically invalidated. So seeing lots of insecurity, lots of self-doubt, but seeing it as like an individual in that person problem. Whereas I feel like chronic invalidation shifts it, doesn't it? It takes it away from the person. It's that shift from what's wrong with you to what has happened to you.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, away from pathologizing models of why someone's behaving in a particular way and yeah, taking the time to understand what someone's been through and believing people as well. You know, Me Too popped in my head while you were talking about believing people when they say things have happened to them.
Mhm. Yeah, well, gosh, invalidation in and of itself spreads across so many different types of invalidation and the impact that that has on a person. But I think you made a good observation there about the difference between the problem being in the person versus what the person has experienced. It's the difference between someone being upset and being told, you're too sensitive, you need to get thicker skin, you need to toughen up,
Mm.
versus, well, you can react sensitively to things and that is okay because this can be really upsetting, and dealing with it in more of an affirming way, not in a way where the problem is in the person and you need to change how you are, rather than it's okay that that's how you are, and having that validated and be met with trying to be understood and affirmed, that one of those very much positions the problem in the person and the other type it doesn't.
Yeah. And I think that's why it felt so important to have this episode. You know, the part about it not having been spoken about very much, that maybe some listeners won't have heard about it, or maybe have started to see about it and think, oh, what's that? Or, oh, yeah, that's me. Yeah, just that it's a thing.
Well, firstly, what does it mean to be invalidated on a singular level?
To me, being invalidated is where somebody tells you that your experience is wrong,
Yeah.
just to put it simply.
No, that was an excellent description. Yeah. So somebody telling you that your experience of something is wrong. Yeah. Well, that your experience of something is wrong, that the way you're feeling about something is wrong, that the way you're thinking of something or evaluating something is wrong.
Yeah.
It's any time that somebody's reaction to you invalidates whatever it is that you're experiencing. That sounds quite overt, and it's not always overt. So if you were to say, this thing happened to me and I felt really rejected, for example,
Mhm.
it doesn't have to be as overt as someone saying, no, you're wrong about that. That's not how you should feel. You should feel this way. Sometimes it literally is that. And other
Yeah.
times it's more subtle.
Mhm.
Well, maybe they meant it like this, or, oh, I'm sure that's not how they meant it to come across.
Mm.
Already putting on a perspective when they weren't actually there about how maybe you should consider this, or maybe you're not thinking about it properly or fairly or right. Sometimes it can be more subtle, but it's still invalidation.
Yeah. Yeah. And as you say it like that, it just makes me think of how delicate a balance it can be. Because I know for myself that I can very easily jump to the worst case scenario, jump to the worst possible conclusion. So sometimes I need someone to say to me, maybe it's not as terrible as that. So, yeah. And I don't actually even know, as I'm thinking about it, how maybe there's something about holding the possibility that I'm right and exploring other options that feels different to there not being space for my perspective to be considered as well alongside other possibilities. Does that make sense?
Yeah, or people jumping to explore that bit first rather than trying to understand your perspective first.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, so tell me why it feels that way
Yeah.
to you. How are you experiencing that? And taking that first. There's almost something about consent. When you're asking someone else, this happened and this is how I'm feeling about it. What do you think? How might you feel in that situation? When you're inviting someone else
Yeah.
because you're unsure or because you want someone else's opinion, that's very different for someone just straight away just telling you exactly what they think
Yeah.
without thinking about actually how is that going to land for the other person? How is that going to make them feel given that they've now told me this
Yeah.
thing? Because usually when we're expressing an emotion, something that we feel a certain big feeling about, it's a very vulnerable position in the first place to go
Yeah.
into that.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it's just for the other person to be mindful of that, I think would make a difference.
Yeah. And I think even if it's is that like one-off thing, there's still a good reason for the feeling. Even if the scenario is not how you've imagined it in your head and you've gone to the worst case scenario like I might do, that there's still good reason for the feeling. And I think there's something about validating that part as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, right, I can see why you'd feel like that, or I could see why you would think that, or I could understand why you might make that assumption. And it's very different to like, oh, don't be silly, they didn't mean it like that, or yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and all,
All those other phrases that people can use, such as, well, everything happens for a reason, or there's someone out there worse off than you. I mean, they perhaps feel a bit more dismissing than maybe invalidating, but similar sort of feelings that you might feel afterwards.
yeah, I think that dismissing falls under the umbrella of invalidating. Yeah. And also, it made me think about the word chronic. So I used to think chronic meant acute, like
You got them
severe.
mixed up.
Yeah. So, like, chronic back pain was like, oh, yeah, really bad back pain. So, I think there's something about the word chronic as well. Is it being a pattern of invalidation, like again and again and again, like whenever your feelings come up, or if you're thinking about something in a certain way, or you offer your perspective on something, that the continuous experience is that you're told it's not like that, it's not like that, it's not like that, or that isn't appropriate, or that isn't real, or that isn't, yeah, whatever.
Yeah. All of the above.
Yeah.
It's just when something has been such a feature of our life and usually goes right back into childhood. But yeah, very much happens with parents, with siblings, with teachers, with friendship groups. It can spread across all things, and people might experience it in different places or with different people, or even in all of those places with all people. But that drip, drip, drip of you are wrong,
Yeah.
that's not reality. I think that that's the part that can make it feel a bit gaslighty, even if that's not the person's intention.
Yeah.
Just the impact of that on a person and how they see themselves and engage with their own thoughts and feelings is absolutely huge.
Yeah. It just feels like the basis of everything, doesn't it? If you can't trust your own thoughts and feelings, how do you begin to engage in the world in a way that feels okay?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I know that I've experienced chronic invalidation a lot, like for a long time and across a lot of different relationships. But when I was thinking about this episode, I was finding it really hard to put my finger on experiences that I could talk about, specific experiences that I could talk about as examples. And that kind of felt like a reflection of how I experience being invalidated, that I don't think I realize in the moment what's happening. I maybe get a feeling in my body. I think it's kind of like, yeah, maybe like a heaviness in my stomach. I think I often get like a wobbly feeling in my arms as well. As
Right.
there's that, so there's some kind of body level recognition of this person doesn't get it, but it doesn't quite form as a cognitive thought. And it's almost like a confusion, like I just go into a confusion state. And probably because it's happened so many times, yeah, there is that self doubt of, oh, have I misunderstood this as well? But it feels so real in my body. So how can I have misunderstood? And then also, I wondered about like delayed processing, which I think is quite common among neurodivergent people. And then I wondered about, is delayed processing a neurodivergent thing specifically? Or is it that we've learned so many times that it's not safe to react to certain things, that our unconscious shuts things down until we're in a safe place to think things through and make sense of it? And I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah. No, but it's interesting to ponder. It could potentially be either, and it could be both.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like that has to play some part, especially because not only do we take in so much more information that we need to have time to sift through, and where we can't be as reactive in the moment because data overload. But at the same time, we've then also learned that we have to really analyze then all of that data to not get it wrong, to not say the wrong thing, to not be invalidated. That potentially it's those two processes coming together at the same
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
But you're right. I think that's why perhaps this is something that's not really been named before until this term, chronic invalidation,
Yeah.
has come forth. Because so there are very specific things in my mind that I can connect to being invalidated.
Mhm.
But the reason that they stand out is because they're not everyday situations.
Mm.
So I have memories of chronic invalidation that stand out very much, but that's because they're directly tied to a disclosure of trauma. So they're
Okay.
much more heightened, and I can very clearly remember exactly what that felt like in those big moments.
Sure.
But the everyday scenarios of
Yeah.
smaller, but still just as important moments of just saying something to a friend and getting an invalidated response back
Yeah.
because I'm going to go back to when I said drip, drip, drip. I feel like the bigger, more noticeable ones are like a huge flood of water crashing down. You can really know what that was and how that felt. But in the smaller drip, drip, drip moments, they're still just as impactful. They still create the sea at the same level. Just kind of running with this metaphor. It's not quite working, but I'm going with it.
Well, yeah.
But the drip, drip, drip still adds to the sea of invalidation and is just as impactful and important. But they're just subtle and more noticeable or expected, or you just shrug it off because you don't always cognitively notice the invalidation.
Yeah.
Like you said, I think it can be quite body based.
Mm.
You might have a thought of, actually, if I was going to have any thought about it, it might be disappointment.
Yeah.
Like I
Okay.
might feel a sense of, oh, I feel disappointed that that's how that person has responded to me. But otherwise, it is just saying something, someone responding, and there's just a feeling inside, almost like a crippling. I would kind of going
Mm.
inward. It's going to be shame again, isn't it? It's always shame. But where
Yeah.
shame is like, ah, hello, we shouldn't have said anything. You're wrong. You're embarrassing. You're sensitive. You're being dramatic again. All of basically that
Yeah.
little quiet voice that you might not necessarily know is what you're hearing in the moment, but the feeling is there. But then the conversation moves on and you're onto something else, and it's like it is forgotten now. But it's not really. It's still there and it still is existing in the background.
Yeah. Yeah. It was interesting. As you said disappointed, I was like, oh, that kind of feels like a calm. Oh, that was disappointing. And like my internal experience is almost like fireworks or something. It's like strong and intense and like, I guess a fight or flight type response of how do I get myself out of here? How do I maintain an image of feeling okay or appearing okay, having
Yeah.
revealed some vulnerable thing about myself?
Oh, the way I experience disappointment is not calm. It's like fight or flight.
Right.
It's
Maybe it
big.
was just the way you were saying it. It just sounded a bit like,
Well,
oh,
that
this
was
is
just a little bit
sad.
disappointing.
Yeah.
No, it's crushing disappointment.
Right.
It makes sense why that's so difficult to actually put a name or a label to. And I'm not saying that in the sense that it needs labeling, but once we can say, oh, that's what that is, it really can help to make sense of, that's what I experience in those moments.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's one of those things that takes a lot of time as well. So even though I feel like over the last few years and months, I feel like I've gone through another round of like, oh no, actually I really can trust myself. I do, that it can still take time, that my body will still respond before my brain can catch up and go, no, you're feeling like this because they've just told you that your experience isn't real. You can hold on to your experience. You know yourself best. You are the expert on yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. If I had to summarize, I'm making something complex a bit simple here, but if I was to summarize how chronic invalidation might show up, it's, for example, being upset about something, and your first question is, am I allowed to be upset about this?
Yes.
You're just questioning that. Then maybe perhaps that's in the moments that you start to tell other people because you don't know how to formulate an opinion on whether or not it's okay that you're upset about it. So you might seek out, you might tell the story of what's happened to lots of different people to try and understand their perspectives to help you understand your perspective, although it may not actually be your perspective, but you might not know any other way to figure it out by checking out, well, what would someone else think or feel in this scenario, because you've lost all ability to know that for yourself.
Yeah. And it feels like there's such a cycle in there because so you've got that question of, am I allowed to feel like this? And I think that can often come up. I think it can come up no matter how big the problem is, because I think with chronic invalidation, you can lose perspective on how big something is or isn't.
Mm.
But I think when you've been invalidated a lot and when you can't trust your perception and you probably feel quite insecure, little things can feel massive. So as an old example, my therapist, so when I was living in Nottingham, saw her in her practice in Nottingham. She moved to Leicester, but she didn't tell me this. She just updated her location on Twitter, where I followed her on Twitter when it was Twitter. Lost my mind. It was such an intense feeling. And of course, now I can look at it and be like, well, yeah, of course, I was scared I was going to lose her. I was scared that she was going to move her practice to Leicester, even though that was an equal distance drive for me. Part of me was terrified that I was going to lose her. So I was having a really strong reaction to it. And it felt embarrassing to go to her and say, I've seen you change your location and I feel like I'm going to die. Like that's how intense it was. It was such an intense response. So then there can be the logical part of my mind that's like, that is too much. That is too strong. Like you shouldn't feel like that. Knowing what I know I'd already qualified as a therapist, so I knew it. I knew the theory. I think this is another really important part of things as well. The difference between knowing something in your mind and knowing it in your body, and the ways that your unconscious mind can react to things faster than you can make sense of things.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it was huge. And that question of, is it okay to feel like this? What I say to my clients a lot is, it is how you feel. Whether it's okay or not, it is how you feel. So let's meet you there. And also, who gets to be the judge? Who gets to decide? Is it? I always imagine like a family fortunes panel, where they say, we've asked 100 people whether it's okay or not. Like, who gets to decide whether it's okay or not?
It's then like,
Yeah.
Yeah. But also then, as you were talking about your response, you said cognitively, oh, I shouldn't be feeling this way about it. This is a bit much. That this reaction is over the top. And they're the things that we can feel and say to ourselves. But actually, I imagine with what you were dealing with at that time, that it was a big deal.
Yeah.
It was. And that's where I don't like to use terminology like overreact or your emotions aren't proportionate to the situation, which is something that people can hear a lot, but it also comes up in different schools of psychotherapy. And I don't really think it's about whether something is proportionate or not. Usually the emotional response makes sense. And don't get me wrong, I do understand that people would like to not have these really big emotional responses to things in a way that can feel not helpful, or maybe for somebody would like to respond in a way that feels more reasonable. It's just like a reasonableness, isn't it? So I get that. And at the same time, the way in which we respond usually makes sense. And I think when we can work through that, we might find that sometimes our reactions aren't as big.
Yeah.
I feel like that was a bit fumbly, but I feel like what I'm trying to say is I don't feel like the goal is let's make your reactions smaller. I think the goal is let's understand your reactions, validate where that's come from. And when you understand those things more, I think some reactions naturally then aren't as big. Your capacity to tolerate things that go on gets wider. And I feel like the focus shouldn't be on, are your emotions proportionate, but let's look at your emotional capacity as to why sometimes these things feel really big, which is totally different to invalidating someone's emotional experience.
Yeah. Yeah. And an inevitable part of experiencing chronic invalidation is then turning that on ourselves and invalidating ourselves. And what I often say to people I work with is the feelings are so big because you keep pushing them down. You keep making them shut up. So they're having to get louder and louder and louder. They're having to scream at you because you're not listening when they're whispering. And when we start to make space for the feelings, they just become more tolerable. I'm trying to think, like, do they get smaller? Does the volume turn down? I don't know. I'm not actually sure. I don't think they do. I think I'm thinking, so if I think about my own emotional experience, I have big, intense feelings, like we were saying before, like it's a really super intense feeling. Still, even after years and years of very good therapy, the intensity of my feelings hasn't gone away. But what has gone away is me turning on myself. I am no longer another voice most of the time saying to myself, it's not okay to feel like this. You shouldn't feel like this. You shouldn't. That most of the time I'm able to pause and say, this makes sense. This is going to make sense on some level, in some way. Some part of me, probably a very young part of me, is really frightened about something, and it's okay to feel like this. I think there is another piece around the impact that this then has on relationships. And I think so again, I'll speak from my own experience, but part of my experience has been withdrawing from relationships where I'm invalidated a lot, because it really isn't good for me. So limiting contact with people that are invalidating, and also looking at what's my part in how it then shows up in relationships where I'm not being invalidated, but maybe I'm expected to be, or like I'll try not to push people away before they can get close enough. Does that make sense?
Oh, yes. Yeah, definitely. Or to your first point about, do the emotions get quieter? I would say my experience mirrors yours, that I still feel emotions deeply and intensely, but my capacity to tolerate that is better. That's grown.
Yeah.
So before they might have felt big and I can't deal with that, whereas now they feel big and a lot of the time I can deal with that.
Yeah.
And stopping the self-invalidation, as you mentioned, if you're already experiencing a big emotion and then you're invalidating that emotion and then you're telling yourself you shouldn't feel that way, berating yourself, being critical of yourself for not feeling that way, trying to make it go away, you're just heightening everything. And now you've got so much going on that it's going to make it very hard to tolerate anything. Whereas when you have a big emotion and you're met with that self-compassion and kindness, when you make sense of it, when you understand it, when you don't invalidate, when you don't dismiss, when you don't suppress, it creates space to then actually be able to tolerate the big emotion. So I think that makes a lot of difference. And on your second point, we've already said that chronic invalidation is harmful, and research is showing that chronic invalidation is trauma. I'm trying to understand here the difference between people who maybe are a bit careless or not very thoughtful, think about what they're saying before they say it, or how this might feel or land for the other person, versus those instances where maybe someone feels like they're genuinely helping you or saying something that's going to be helpful or to make you not feel upset about something anymore. So they're well-intentioned, but it still lands as invalidation and is still harmful.
Yeah. It makes me think about that person's emotional capacity. Because if you're feeling a big feeling and you're sharing it with someone, really you need them to have the capacity to hold that big emotion. And if they themselves aren't comfortable with their own emotions, they're probably not going to be very good at being with your emotions either. So that makes me think about people that, they mean well, but they just can't quite manage it. So they'll try and make it go away. Not to shut you up. Well, yeah, I suppose it is to shut you up, but not in a cruel way, I suppose.
Yeah, or not in a way that they won't realize that that's what they're doing.
Yes. Yeah.
They've perhaps not clocked their uncomfortableness.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's what can make relationships difficult, because if you have friendships with people where they frequently invalidate and dismiss your emotional experience, your thoughts, your feelings, then they ultimately may end up being friendships, relationships that you question actually whether these are good for you to be in. But equally, there are other scenarios where the person may be unaware, well-intentioned, And sometimes you feel heard by that person and sometimes you don't. It just can make relationships just feel so complex. If we were to disengage anytime somebody said something invalidating, where would we be in our relationships? But I just want to name that because there's a real sadness for me in that. And I think, well, we've both said how important it is for us to feel known, like know others and also be known in and of ourselves. I don't really even know what I'm trying to say, except that there's a real sadness in me that you have to accept in relationships. Invalidation is sometimes going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. It's absolutely inevitable. The reality is we are human, and yeah, people get tired. Nobody has perfect emotional capacity. And it's not always the right time to go into an emotional thing. If you're going into a job interview and something really sad has happened that morning, you can't really take the sadness into the job interview. Even if it was for a psychotherapy job, you still wouldn't.
Right.
Right? You probably still wouldn't. But so invalidation is always going to happen. And again, that just brings me back to context of how does this relationship usually feel, or relationships or organization, whatever it is. Yeah, that the context is important.
Mm-hmm.
And if you push back a bit, if you push back and say, no, actually, can you just come back to me, because that's not how it is. It is, it really feels like this. Do they double down, or do they say, oh, sorry, yeah, let me listen?
Right. Yeah.
There's something there as well. Yeah. And actually, just to go back a little bit to the point about, are emotions always massive? What popped into my head a moment ago is, and I'm sure I've spoken about this on an episode already, but where my husband had done something that I wasn't happy with, and it wasn't a massive thing at all, but again, the feeling was big. And he just validated me in my anger, and the anger just disappeared. It just dissolved in my body. So all of this enormous feeling that I had just went, whoo, and was gone.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking about, like, I've had a few difficult conversations with people over the last few weeks and months. And as I've been met with validation, it's like all these big conversations that I was building up and up and up in my head have just been like, oh, right, yeah, okay. I didn't need to get all that in my head about it, which brings me back again to, I suppose, so chronic invalidation is a problem. If somebody is chronically invalidating you, that is a problem. And it can have really serious consequences. It's important to take seriously. And I think from a therapeutic perspective, like, where's the work is what's going on in the person that is being invalidated. And the ideal is to be able to get to a place where, if you are being chronically invalidated, that you can recognize it and that you can stay with yourself, that we can start to challenge that self-doubt piece. And it made me think about what we said a few episodes ago about the inner critic. Yeah. So if somebody's invalidating you and you've got that critical part of like, oh, of course you feel too much and you're wrong and all of that. And you said, yeah, and we also need to build up the nurturing part as well. Kind of feels like they work together, of like calming this part down and building up that nurturing part, so that you can start to get a more automatic process of, it's okay, you're okay. This person doesn't get it, but your feelings are still valid.
Yeah, to have that other voice. It can take a long time to start to build that voice, because the self-doubt can just plague you so deeply when you have experienced it so much.
Yeah.
And it's so important for our listeners, for people who listen to our podcast, because if you are sensitive, if you are neurodivergent, you are considerably more likely to have experienced chronic invalidation over your lifetime, right from a very, very young age. Whether that's down to covering your ears when there has been really loud noises and being, what are you doing? What are you doing? Stop that, stop that. Telling someone that your clothes are itchy or they make you uncomfortable. No, they're not. They're fine. You'll get used to it. Still go to school wearing it. So there are so many difficult sensory experiences that someone might have had if they're being told that they're wrong and that, oh, it's fine, it's fine.
Yeah.
Just thinking about ADHD and how ADHDers will have received a significantly higher negative comments and criticisms over their life than someone who isn't ADHD. But that in and of itself then forms a part of invalidation. So when you've genuinely forgot to do something and your parents like, but I literally just told you, like, no, you haven't, you're lying, or don't make excuses, just being careless. There's so many things that people might have heard that can just lead them to doubt their reality. Or maybe I didn't forget. Maybe I am just making this up. Or maybe I really am like this. Maybe I really am like that. Maybe that's not the case. Maybe there is just something wrong with me. I should be okay with this. The invalidation can take so many forms. That's not just purely emotional, but just in terms of the way in which we are in the world. And if we are deeply feeling people in sensitive bodies, if we're surrounded by people who aren't that, they're not going to understand our experience. And sometimes, unfortunately, rather than trying to understand that our experience of the world is different, we just get told we're wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. It even makes me think about babies. So when my eldest was a baby, cry it out was still a big thing.
Mm.
And I feel like that is a form of invalidation as well. That you've got this baby crying and you just don't respond to it because some I'm trying to hunt around for yeah, not a swear word. Some person has written a book and told you to leave your crying baby screaming their head off. But what you're
Mhm.
essentially giving the baby the message is there's not a problem.
Mhm.
And I'm not going to respond to whatever you think the problem is.
Yeah, I'm not coming for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
So even, yeah, it can go right all the way back to the very beginning of your life. Yeah.
Yeah, it really can.
Mm.
And just thinking about the way in which that impacts a person fills me with so much sadness.
Mm. Yeah.
It's very difficult to have a strong sense of self, to have a good enough level of self esteem, or to have a sense of confidence in yourself, to trust your intuition, trust your gut, know how you feel and know that that's okay. All of that, you can't develop any of that.
No. It's just the basis for so much, isn't it?
Hmm.
Yeah. I feel like I've got a lot of energy in me as we're talking about this of like, how do we get this more known? How do we talk about this even more? Like, it's such an important piece of certainly the work that I do. I'm sure it is for you as well, just thinking about the kind of people that you work with.
Yeah.
And it is just missed as trauma. I think unless you know what chronic invalidation is and the impact that it can have, I just don't think you'd really clock it as trauma. I think loads of people that I work with when they come to me still think of trauma as just road accidents and war and those big things. But yeah, this has such a it just feels like it just interrupts the very building blocks of what makes a person, doesn't it?
Yeah, that makes me think of the quote by Gabor Mate,
Hmm.
because a lot of people, when they hear of trauma, they think of the event, an event that is clearly a traumatic event.
Hmm.
But the event is just the event. It's not what matters, isn't necessarily the event, it's what happens within us
Yeah.
because of that event, which is Gabor Mate, a well known trauma researcher. And yeah, he says trauma is not what happens to you, trauma is what happens inside of you as a result of what has happened to you. So when you consider that chronic invalidation affects you on so many different levels that fundamentally change the way you see yourself and interact with yourself in the world across your lifespan.
Mm.
You can't really get a better definition of trauma than that.
No, and that makes me think about the outcomes for people who experience traumatic things but have a safe person to like debrief with or talk things through or, yeah, be understood in their experience of that traumatic event versus somebody who doesn't. And when we're talking about chronic validation, I think quite often we're talking about the person that we thought was safe or hoped to be safe being the person that is saying whatever you've experienced was not real or not that bad or whatever. That feels like a compounding trauma in itself.
Mhm. Absolutely.
Mm.
Yeah. This is something I talk about a lot in the trauma work that I do, but particularly when someone has been harmed by another person and then discloses that to somebody else. And there's a really great article that Carolyn Spring wrote. So Carolyn Spring is a survivor of abuse and now does lots of research and training for a wide variety of professionals on the impact of abuse. But she wrote a great article for anyone that might want to find it. Although if you have experienced trauma, just with some caution, because there are things in that that might be tricky. But she wrote an article called The Trauma and the Bears. I can't go into the whole thing now, but essentially it's talking about imagining that you live in a prehistoric community of people and you go out into the woods with your tribe to forage for food and you come across a bear and a traumatic event happens with the bear. And then you return to your camp, you return to your community. And what happens when you return to your community is really key in how the trauma goes on to impact you. And where, as you just said, a secondary trauma can occur on top of the original trauma. So if you go back to your community and you share what's happened and you're met with a warm and loving response, people who seek to understand what happened to you, people who automatically believe what happened to you, and then say, oh, okay, how can we protect the rest of the community from this bear and it's taken seriously? If you have that experience, research shows you are less likely to go on to develop PTSD.
Right.
Versus if you go back to your tribe and they say, well, what were you doing in that part of the woods? You know, bears can go there. So it's kind of your fault that you got attacked. You shouldn't have gone there in the first place. If you go back and you're not believed, well, I can't see any evidence that you were hurt by a bear. Did that really happen? So if you're not believed, if you are blamed, if you are dismissed, if you're kind of just ignored, nobody really takes it seriously, then you are much more likely to become traumatized by that event and have a secondary trauma on top of it. And the other example is actually if you don't have anyone in your community that you can even go to share that this happened and what it's like to just be left alone with it because there is no space to even take it to in the first place. So the article is brilliant for how it talks about it. It goes into detail in the different types of trauma responses and what might happen in that scenario, and then what happens when you return to your community. But it really highlights how the way in which people respond to you in and of itself can cause another trauma on top of the trauma that you've already experienced, which is just why chronic invalidation is so important to speak about, both in those bigger event scenarios, but also in the everyday ones that we've been talking about.
Yeah. Feels like really helpful imagery to think about how these situations might impact us.
Really brings it to life. You can really feel it.
So we've said quite a lot so far, and I wanted to just bring in how this can impact therapy sometimes, because just because you're in therapy doesn't mean you're suddenly going to feel safe enough to share things. And I think this is really important. If you've been afraid to share things with people because you've been invalidated so much, you're probably going to be afraid that your therapist is going to invalidate you too.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you've got lots and lots of experiences where they haven't invalidated you, that actually it would make sense if you're holding on to something that you're too scared to tell them, or you feel like you're making a fuss about nothing. Yeah. And that can be a horrible and lonely experience. And I've been through a few times with a couple of different therapists where it's taken me so long to build up the courage to say, I really need to talk about this thing with you, but I'm scared to do that. So yeah, if you are feeling like that, you're not alone. I think a good way to start with things like that is to start the conversation without putting any pressure on yourself to share what the thing is, to just bring in that there's something that you haven't said and you'd like to discuss why you haven't said it rather than talking about the thing.
Mm-hmm.
It can be such an uncomfortable experience to be sat with. So I just wanted to say it in case anyone else is in that same position.
Yeah. It's something that it is so hard to name. Both there's a thing that I'm scared to talk about, but also saying, I'm scared to tell you this in case you're going to judge me, or I'm scared to tell you this in case you might invalidate me. People can be worried about offending their therapist, where you might be caring for your therapist's feelings, in that space, especially if you've done that with everybody else in your life where their feelings come above yours. You may even put your therapist's feelings above yours.
Yeah.
So it can be so hard to talk about that. And also, we can't go without saying that, unfortunately, harm is also caused in therapy, and people have genuinely been invalidated by therapists before.
Yeah. Yeah, that is absolutely true. Which I think is what makes it so scary, isn't it? If your therapist is the only person or one of a very small number of people that you feel like you can trust to talk things through with, if you've got something to talk about and you feel like you're going to offend them or you might lose the relationship somehow, that makes it, yeah, just puts more pressure on it, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Yeah. But good if we can start to name that that's what's going on
Yes.
in the
Yeah.
therapy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when I have managed to do that, it has been really good to be able to do
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Mm. Well, how do we start to untangle this if we recognize that, oh, okay, maybe this level of self doubt that I am plagued with, where I can never really trust my thoughts and feelings and opinions about something? Where do we start to unpick that and challenge that?
Yeah. Again, that just feels like such an enormous question. And that it feels like such an individual thing because there's usually, yeah, layers upon layers of things. So it's like, where do you start to find the beginnings of threads? I suppose I wonder about looking out for some of the phrases that we've said today. So when you said about, am I allowed to feel like this?
Hmm. So increasing your self awareness by
Mm,
recognizing what
mm,
you do, what you say to yourself when you experience an emotion about something, clocking
yeah,
how you're talking to yourself about it.
yeah, yeah. I kind of like I don't want my answer to be go to therapy because it's not always accessible for people to do that. And I guess the complication is that to heal from chronic invalidation, you're going to need a safe person.
Hmm.
You're going to need a safe relationship where you can start to feel your feelings and not invalidate yourself.
Mm.
So perhaps
Yeah.
that's another piece is, yeah, so that kind of increasing the self awareness, noticing the things that you're saying to yourself and seeing if you can notice when you are invalidating yourself
Mm.
and starting to change that a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. If we're going down the road of how do we begin to heal this, then
Mm,
we are talking about something that is long term
mm,
and where we do need to have safe relationships in order to heal the relational aspects of what
mhm,
it means to be chronically invalidated by people. But I do think increasing your self awareness by checking in with how you talk to yourself
mm.
about what you experience can be helpful. I think any time that you say words like, well, maybe I'm wrong, or probably I'm overreacting, anytime you
Mm,
start to use that kind of language,
mm,
just try to clock it.
mhm.
And I'm just a big believer in just saying, I feel how I feel. That's
Yeah.
it, full stop. I
Mhm,
feel how I feel.
mhm.
Now, that doesn't mean that you have to let that feeling take control, or let's say a friend has hurt you. It doesn't mean you have to say, I feel really hurt. I feel how I feel. I'm never seeing them again.
Yeah.
You can say, I feel really hurt. I feel how I feel. I'm going to let myself feel how I feel. And then later unpack if there was any like behavioral need that you wanted to do after that, that maybe you don't
Yeah.
actually have to follow on from that feeling,
Yeah.
but that maybe you can still allow that feeling to be.
Yeah.
I said that like that's very easy to do. Usually, the self analyzing, going over and over things in your mind is pretty automatic, and we're probably doing it
Mhm,
before we've even realized that we're doing it.
mm.
Uh, but just holding that phrase in your mind of, I feel how I feel.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good one. That's a good
Mm.
one.
Yeah.
Another thing that I think can be helpful is holding opposing responses together. So even if somebody is saying, no, that's not true or not reasonable or whatever, that's just one person's perspective. And you can still hold your experience as well
Hmm.
alongside that. So not having to squash your experience fully down, but start to be a bit curious about, yeah, they're entitled to their opinion and that's okay. That's their perspective. And I'm entitled to my opinion and this is okay. And this is my perspective. Yeah. So starting to hold those two together.
I think holding them together is a good step because it's very difficult to say from now on, just trust your initial appraisal of a situation. And that if a friend says differently, chances are you're probably going to believe their version than yours and think, well, they're probably right then and I'm probably wrong. But rather than having to either wholly accept yours or wholly accept theirs, what you said, bringing them both in So you're recognizing, okay, these are different perspectives rather than there's a right way here and a wrong way here.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of these problems can come up if you're an emotional person born into an unemotional family.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And as much as parts of me disagree with this, it is acceptable to be an unemotional person.
Is it?
For them, it's fine.
Yes, it is, even if it's something I cannot comprehend.
Right. Yeah. My body is like, no, it isn't. But I guess it's the reality. We're not going to force them into being emotional people. And we can make space for ourselves to be emotional.
Yeah. Well, I'm really conscious that we need to end this episode, and I'm really wanting to keep talking. There's so much more to say. We've not actually done a part 2 on an episode for a long time, so maybe we could actually part 2 this at some point.
Yeah.
If you've grown up being told in 1,000 small ways that your feelings were too much, too dramatic, not quite right, it makes sense that you learned not to trust them.
Of course, you got really good at talking yourself out of your own experience. That was survival, but you don't have to keep surviving in the same way.
Next time, we're talking about too sensitive for this body. What happens when sensitivity isn't just something you feel emotionally, but something you feel in your chest, your gut, your bones. It's about the connection between your nervous system and your whole body health.
But for now, we'll leave you with this. When did you last feel something and let it be real? How can you start to be the person who finally says, yeah, that makes sense. Of course you feel that way. That's all from us today. If this episode made you feel a bit less alone, the best way to help us reach more people is to subscribe, rate the podcast, and follow Too Much Apparently on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube.
Those simple clicks help other sensitive humans find us when they need it most. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back soon.